The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 37 missed calls, 5 voicemails, all from the same name's dad, Amelia, a couple from unknown numbers I didn't bother to save. I sat in the middle of the empty living room, legs crossed on the floor where the coffee table used to be. The house echoed differently now. Quieter, free. It had only been 10 days. Just 10 days since they left for Hawaii, all three of them. My father, Harold, my older sister, Amelia, her 2 kids. A perfect family vacation minus the one person they deemed too embarrassing to join. Claire, you'd ruin the vibe. Honestly, we just need someone to take care of the house while we're gone. Dad had said like he was doing me a favor. Amelia, ever the agreeable CEO, had nodded like it was a business transaction. You'd hate the humidity anyway, she added. That had been their final word. No invite, no discussion, just a decision made on my behalf. But now the house was empty. Or rather, it wasn't theirs anymore. And I wasn't sitting in it because I was still their obedient little house sitter. I was here because I had decided they wouldn't get to write the ending of my story. Not this time. 10 days ago, I was the invisible one, the family's emotional liability, the unmarried freelance designer who still lived at home. Today, I was the legal owner of the house they thought they'd inherit. And they had no idea. At least not yet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. From Amelia. Just 3 words. Where's our house? I didn't reply. Not yet. Let them sit with the confusion a little longer. Let them wonder what had happened while they were busy sipping cocktails and taking photos for Instagram and matching linen. I had always been the quiet one, the one who said yes, stayed small, stayed useful. They thought I was weak. What they never understood was that quiet doesn't mean powerless. And patience. Patience is a weapon. Used correctly, it cuts deeper than rage ever could. I picked up the remote from the floor and turned off the ceiling fan, letting the stillness take over. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm, or before one. In my case, it was both. 10 days ago, they left thinking they had everything under control. They believed I'd sit in this house and wait like I always did. But when they came back from vacation, the house was gone. And so was I. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 33 years old. I work as a freelance UX designer, mostly remote gigs, and I love what I do even if my family thinks it doesn't count as a real job. I never needed much, just a laptop, my design software, a good Wi-Fi connection, and peace. I used to get 2 out of 4. I've lived in this house most of my life. After Mom passed away 4 years ago, I stayed. At first, it was to help Dad. He wasn't doing well emotionally or practically. The house needed repairs. Bills needed managing. Amelia visited now and then with her kids, dropped off groceries, and then disappeared back into her glass office tower and curated success. She called herself the backbone of the family. I was the background. Dad never said it out loud, but I could see the shift. Without Mom to anchor us, the hierarchy became crystal clear. Amelia was the golden child, divorced but successful, loud-driven and always on the move. Her kids adored her. Her Instagram said it all, pictures of awards, weekend getaways, business panels. Meanwhile, I became the one they talked about like a problem to be solved. Claire's sweet, but she's so stuck, Dad once told a neighbor, as if choosing stability over chaos was weakness. I worked from my childhood bedroom, fixed leaking faucets, paid the electric bill out of my own freelance checks when Dad's pension was late, and cooked dinner when Amelia couldn't be bothered to visit. But none of that ever counted. To them, I was still the girl who never left. A placeholder, the spare, a burden they didn't know what to do with. I remember once asking Amelia why they never included me in family trips. She looked up from her phone and said, "Claire, you wouldn't enjoy them. You don't like social stuff. And besides, it's just easier this way." Easier. For them. Not once did anyone ask what I wanted. They assumed I had no dreams, no ambitions, no plans. Just a quiet, semi-useful presence who folded laundry and stayed out of the way. I never raised my voice. I never made demands. I thought that would make them love me. I thought that would earn me belonging. But love earned through silence is not love. It's control. I realized that too late, but just in time. The worst part, I believed them. For years, I swallowed their labels, made myself smaller, bent around their expectations. I wore my invisibility like armor, but somewhere deep down, I always knew. There was a different version of me, a version who didn't beg to be seen, a version who made her own choices, a version my mother used to tell me was in there waiting. "You're not fragile," she'd whisper when I cried after family dinners. "You're just surrounded by people who can't handle your clarity." I didn't understand that back then. But I do now. My family made the mistake of confusing silence with submission. And when they called me embarrassing for being exactly who I am, they gave me the final push I needed. That moment, that offhand dismissal, wasn't the beginning of my downfall. It was the beginning of theirs. It started like most things in my family did, with a casual insult disguised as a decision. One Sunday afternoon, about 3 weeks before everything unraveled, I walked into the kitchen and saw Amelia hunched over her iPad, planning the Hawaii trip. She had color-coded tabs open, travel blogs bookmarked, and her kids' names already added to a snorkeling itinerary. Dad was at the table too, sipping coffee, nodding along as if all of this was completely normal. "Oh, Claire," Amelia said without looking up, "we're gonna need you to handle the house while we're gone." I blinked. "Wait, Hawaii? I didn't even know you guys had finalized that." Dad cleared his throat. "Well, we weren't sure until recently, but yes, it's booked. 10 days. We leave in 2 weeks." "And I'm not coming," I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Amelia looked up then, giving me that half smile she reserved for correcting children. "Claire, be serious. You hate flying. You get overwhelmed in groups. You'd be miserable. Plus, someone needs to look after the place." I opened my mouth, but Dad cut in, his voice calm but final. "Claire, don't make this difficult. It's not your kind of trip. Just be helpful, all right? Take care of the house, water the plants, make sure the mail doesn't pile up." I felt my stomach sink. "So I'm not even considered part of the family vacation." Amelia let out a soft laugh. "Claire, don't take it personally. We just want this trip to go smoothly. You being there, it complicates things. No offense, but you can be a little awkward in social settings. And you're not exactly great with the kids," Dad added. That one stung more than I expected. I had helped raise Amelia's children when she was too busy or too tired. I'd made Halloween costumes, helped with math homework, cleaned up after stomach bugs. But none of that mattered now. I wasn't the fun aunt. I was the weird one. The liability. "You're too embarrassing to bring Claire," Dad said suddenly, and the room fell quiet. Even Amelia looked up a little startled by his bluntness. But he didn't apologize. He didn't even flinch. "We're not trying to hurt you," Amelia said, her voice softer. "It's just, we have an image, you know. The kids are excited. We've already paid for everything. Don't make this about you. Don't make this about me." That was the recurring refrain of my life. I stood there frozen in place, wanting to scream, but knowing it would only prove their point. So I nodded. I said, "Sure, I'll look after the house." And I walked out. But inside, something shifted. For the first time, their words didn't just hurt, they clarified things. I wasn't family to them. I was a placeholder, a domestic convenience. And they were so used to me accepting that role, they didn't even hesitate to say it out loud. That was the moment I stopped trying to belong. That was the moment I started planning. The night before their flight, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the room I'd slept in since I was 13, staring at the ceiling fan spin above me. My stomach churned, not with sadness, but something else, anticipation maybe. A quiet readiness I hadn't felt in years. Around midnight, I heard footsteps downstairs. I figured it was just Amelia and Dad wrapping up their packing, so I got up and walked toward the kitchen for water. As I passed the upstairs hallway, I caught a strange sound coming from the vent outside the study. I paused. The study had a floor vent that carried voices unusually well. Mom used to joke it was her secret way of knowing when I was sneaking cookies late at night. The memory made me smile just before the voices below turned my blood cold. "She bought it," Amelia was saying. "Honestly, I didn't think Claire would go down that easy. No tears, no argument." Dad laughed. "She's always been passive. That's the problem. She's used to being overlooked. It's going to be so much easier once we put things in motion," Amelia continued. Once we're back, I'll talk to Dr. Kim and get the paperwork started. We just need something official on record to move forward. You think she'll fight it? Dad asked. Who knows? But if we frame it right, she won't have a choice. Say it's for her health. She's anxious, isolated lives online, barely interacts with anyone. It's enough to raise concern. My heart thudded in my chest. Were they planning to institutionalize me? Once she's out, Amelia added, we liquidate the house. Market's great right now. I already spoke to a broker. He says we can get close to 7 figures easily. And finally be rid of the mess, Dad murmured. Claire was never meant to carry this place. It's too much for her. We'll tell her it's for her own good, Amelia said. She's always been too soft. She'll fold. I backed away from the vent like I'd touched fire. My breathing was shallow, hands trembling. I walked back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of my bed. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there listening to the final pieces of betrayal click into place. They weren't just leaving me behind. They were planning to erase me, put me in a facility, take the house, sell everything, start over without the embarrassing daughter who didn't fit the image. What hurt most wasn't the plan itself. It was how casually they spoke about it. No hesitation, no guilt, just strategy. It wasn't emotion. It was logistics. I reached into my drawer and pulled out my old phone, the one I kept as a backup. I opened the recorder and hit playback just to be sure. The audio was clean. Their entire conversation had been captured through the vent. Every word, every smug calculation. I sent the file to my cloud storage, then emailed it to myself under a decoy subject line. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew this when they boarded that plane the next morning. They weren't leaving me behind. They were setting themselves up for a lesson they wouldn't see coming. And this time I wouldn't be soft. I wouldn't fold. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in the dark, eyes open, mind racing, as memories bled into each other like ink and water. There had been so many small betrayals over the years, moments I had buried under excuses, under a desperate desire to believe my family cared. But now everything was illuminated with cruel clarity. Like the time Amelia's first startup collapsed. She was broke, drowning in debt, and came crying to me late at night, mascara streaking down her face. I need help, Claire. Please. I can't go to Dad. Not after everything. I'd loaned her $8,000, my entire emergency fund. She promised to pay it back in 6 months. That was 5 years ago. I never saw a dime. Not even an apology. Just a thank you dinner she made me pay for. Or the time Dad had his minor stroke, and I put my work on hold to care for him. I canceled 2 projects, lost a major client, but stayed home because he was family, and I thought that meant something. Amelia sent flowers from whatever conference she was speaking at and called it even. You're so good at that nurturing stuff, she'd said. Honestly, I wouldn't know what to do. And then there was Mom. When the cancer returned, it was me who drove her to appointments. Me who sat through every chemo session. Me who held her hand when she said she didn't want to die in a hospital. Dad barely showed up, always claiming paperwork or church obligations. Amelia flew in twice for photo ops more than support. Still, they painted themselves as the grieving pillars of the family after Mom passed. They planned the memorial. They made speeches. They edited me out of her goodbye. But worst of all were the little moments. The ones that weren't even big enough to register as offenses, but added up like compound interest. Dad forgetting my birthday 3 years in a row. Amelia using my designs in her investor pitch decks without giving me credit. The time I asked them both to take a family photo with me on Christmas and they said, maybe later, and never brought it up again. I used to tell myself they were just busy, just distracted, that they loved me, they just didn't know how to show it. But now with that audio recording still fresh in my mind, I realized the truth. They didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I did for them. They loved the convenience of me, the reliability, the silence. I wasn't family. I was infrastructure, a dependable piece of furniture in a house they thought they owned. But that house wasn't fully theirs, not legally. And that fact, that one overlooked detail, was going to change everything. I stood up, walked to my closet, and pulled down the old accordion file where Mom kept important papers. It was still there untouched since her funeral. Inside, I found what I was looking for, the deed to the house. My mother's name still on it, not just Dad's. And more importantly, no transfer of ownership ever filed. My fingers shook as I ran them over her signature. For the first time in years, I felt her with me. She hadn't left me defenseless. They had just assumed she had. That night, I stopped being the background character in their story. I stopped waiting for them to change. They wouldn't. They never had. The only thing left to change was me, and I was ready. The next morning, I began to move. Not frantically, not impulsively, but with the deliberate pace of someone who knew her window of time was short but sufficient. I waited until they left for the airport, pretending to be asleep, as they dragged suitcases down the hallway. Amelia didn't even bother saying goodbye. Dad left a note on the fridge that said, "Try not to stress yourself, and don't rearrange the living room again." As soon as I heard the front door shut and the Uber roll down the driveway, I walked straight to the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The first email I sent was to Eleanor Ross, Mom's longtime friend and attorney. She'd handled Mom's will, and once told me, "If you ever need help with anything legal, don't hesitate." I hesitated back then. I didn't now. She responded within the hour. "Come in today, bring the deed and your ID." By 11 a.m., I was in her office sitting across from her cherrywood desk, clutching the file like it was a weapon. It was. Eleanor flipped through the documents, nodding slowly, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Well, Claire, they've made a very careless assumption," she said. "Legally, your father doesn't have sole claim. This property is still partially in your mother's estate. If we act quickly, we can file for temporary control as next of kin under the neglected clause, especially if you can make a case for misuse or endangerment." I said, and handed her a flash drive. "What's this, a recording?" "Of a conversation between my father and sister, planning to put me in a facility so they can sell the house." She didn't blink, just inserted the drive, listened to a sample, and nodded. This should do it. The next step was faster than I expected. Eleanor was connected, and she knew how to use urgency to her advantage. By the end of the day, we'd filed a claim to block any sale of the house under my father's name, initiated proceedings to transfer estate control to me under emergency consideration, and scheduled a notary appointment for final documentation. I left her office with a temporary legal standing that allowed me to make decisions on the house. It wasn't permanent yet, but it was enough. Next, I called Sophia Mendoza, a real estate contact I'd worked with before on a branding project. She was sharp, efficient, and loved off-market deals. "I need to sell my house," I told her. "Fast, cash offer preferred." "How fast are we talking? 10 days. Tops, that's tight, but not impossible. You'll have to accept under market, I know. Do it." Within 24 hours, Sophia had 3 interested investors. One of them, Oak and River Properties, was a real estate group buying homes for rental conversions. They weren't sentimental. They weren't slow. We agreed on a price $50,000 under market. Painful, yes. Worth it. Absolutely. I knew exactly what I was trading that money for: autonomy, justice, closure. While Sophia managed the paperwork, I scheduled a moving company. 2 large trucks. One for my own essentials, the other for everything that belonged to Dad and Amelia. I boxed their lives with care, labeled each one, kept an inventory, and arranged a 6-month paid storage unit under their names. I wasn't heartless. I just wasn't their doormat anymore. When I placed the final box inside the storage unit, I felt something release in my chest, like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had finally been set down. I stood in the middle of the house, now echoing with new potential, and for the first time in my life, I felt like it truly belonged to me. Not because of a deed or a legal document, but because I had chosen it. I had defended it, and I was done pretending I had no power. The sale would close in a few days. The timeline was tight, but Sophia assured me everything was on track. I moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment 5 blocks away. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every bill, every piece of furniture, every inch mine. I slept soundly that night, alone, but unburdened. They were sunning themselves in paradise, completely unaware that the home they'd dismissed me in was no longer theirs to return to. And I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. By day 4, everything was in motion. The movers had finished clearing out the last remnants of my family's claim to the house. Sophia sent confirmation that Oak and River had wired the funds for escrow, and Eleanor emailed the revised documents showing full transitional ownership pending final closing in 3 days. All that was left was time. I spent those days not in hiding but in peace. For the first time in years, I read without interruption. I walked through parks without checking my phone for family errands. I cooked dinner for myself, just me, without anyone sighing over missing condiments or slamming fridge doors. But it wasn't until day 6 that the messages started coming. The first call from Amelia came at 3:47 p.m. Hawaii time, which meant they'd just arrived home. Or tried to. I let it ring, then another from Dad this time. The next morning, my voicemail box was full. Claire, what's going on? Amelia's voice was sharp panicked. There's people in the house. They said we don't live there. Where are you? Call me back. Then Dad's voice confused but furious. Claire, what the hell did you do? There's strangers in my house. Our house. They're saying you sold it. That's impossible. You don't have the authority. Message after message, increasing in volume and desperation in rage. Amelia again, you need to fix this. You're out of your mind. You don't get to just decide these things. Then a quieter one. Claire, if this is some kind of cry for help, just call us. We can work something out. I didn't respond. Not yet. I went about my day calm, measured. I sent one email to Eleanor to confirm the buyers had officially recorded the deed. She replied with a single line, confirmed, legally binding. They have no claim. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of my dad standing on the porch of the house that was no longer his, staring at the front door like he didn't recognize it. I studied the image for a long time. I'd seen that same expression before on his face when Mom died. Back then, he looked hollow, lost. But this time, it wasn't grief. It was the realization that the world had moved on without his consent. That control had slipped through his fingers. I finally picked up when Amelia called again at 6 p.m. I didn't say hello. I let her start. Claire, we need to talk. What did you do? Her voice was sharp, demanding. I made some decisions while you were away, I said calmly. Decisions I was legally allowed to make. You should check your email. I sent you something. She was silent for a moment, and I imagined her opening the file I had sent earlier that day. It contained a copy of the house deed transfer, the storage unit address with their belongings, and most importantly, the audio file of her and Dad planning my erasure. I heard the breath catch in her throat. You recorded us? Yes. Claire, that's illegal. That's betrayal. No, I replied, voice steady. Betrayal is planning to institutionalize your sister so you can sell her home without consent. Recording that isn't betrayal, it's evidence, she sputtered. But you didn't have to go this far, you could have just talked to us. I did. For 33 years, Amelia, and you never listened. You never saw me as anything but an inconvenience. You called me embarrassing, now you're embarrassed. That's not the same thing. She went quiet again, then said softer, Dad's devastated. So was I. When I heard what you planned, we didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. That's the problem. I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up. I turned off my phone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they did next. They could call lawyers. They could cry. They could stew in their hotel room or book another flight or sit in the driveway and scream at the clouds. It didn't matter. What mattered was this: they underestimated me. They tried to write me out of my own life, and I rewrote the ending. They never saw it coming, because they never thought I could. That's what made it so satisfying. Not just the act of reclaiming power, but doing it so quietly, so thoroughly, that they were left standing on the sidewalk of a life they thought they owned, realizing too late that the door had already been closed. The next morning, I walked to the corner cafe near my new apartment and ordered coffee like I had every day for the past week. I took a seat by the window and watched the world move calmly around me, Joggers, parents with strollers, a man walking his golden retriever. It was the kind of peaceful scene that felt impossible when you're living under constant surveillance by people who call themselves family. My phone was off, but I knew what was happening. I could feel the storm building from miles away. Around 10 a.m., I got a message from Eleanor. They showed up at the house again. Police were called. New owners handled it professionally. No legal action taken. You're protected. That was all I needed to hear. I pictured them, Dad, red-faced Amelia, snapping into corporate crisis mode, both of them trying to explain to the new tenants why they believed they still had a claim. But they didn't. The paperwork was clean, the transfer final, the deed sealed. It didn't matter how loudly they insisted, or how many times Amelia said, "This is a mistake." It wasn't. It was deliberate. My revenge wasn't about rage. It was about clarity. About making sure they understood that you don't get to treat someone like background noise forever and then act surprised when they walk away and take everything with them. I'd left a folder for them at the storage facility. Inside was a full inventory of their belongings, a key to the unit, and a note that said, "I didn't take anything from you. I simply returned everything that was mine." I hadn't heard back from them directly since the call with Amelia, but I didn't need to. I'd heard all I needed to in those vented whispers the night before they left. Their plans, their tone, the entitlement. They called me a burden, an embarrassment, a problem to be solved. But I had become the solution to my own life, to the house, to the cycle of manipulation that had defined our family since Mom died. On day 9, I walked past the old house one last time. The new tenants were putting up curtains in the living room. A kid's bike was parked on the porch. The neighborhood looked the same, but the house was no longer a monument to my invisibility. It was someone else's beginning. Mine was somewhere else now. In the small apartment filled with furniture, I chose colors I liked and silence I owned. There was no yelling, no backhanded compliments, no invisible scoreboard tracking my worth. Just peace, just me. And that was more than enough. I didn't need to go back, because the only thing left behind in that house was the version of me that stayed quiet to keep the peace. She was gone, and the woman who took her place, she wasn't afraid of silence anymore. She used it to win. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with a cup of tea, staring at the last box I hadn't unpacked. It was small, worn, taped twice over, labeled in Mom's handwriting, "Claire, keep." I opened it slowly. Inside were old sketches I'd done in high school, a poetry notebook with dried flowers tucked between pages, and a card Mom had written for my 25th birthday. I hadn't read it in years. Her handwriting was soft and looping. Don't let the loud ones make you think you're not powerful. They just don't know what to do with someone who doesn't beg for attention. You have a different kind of strength. I read it again and again. It was the only voice in my life that had ever truly seen me. And for so long, I'd tried to earn the love of the ones who never did. I'd twisted myself into versions they might approve of, quieter, more helpful, less visible. But nothing I did was ever enough. Because they didn't want a version of me. They wanted absence. And now, they had it. Full and complete. I was no longer in their home, their orbit, their plan. I had taken my story and walked out the door. Not with a scream or a slam fist, but with a contract and a closing date. I never fought them the way they expected. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't cry on the porch and ask to be loved. I simply acted. I learned their language, legal, financial, procedural, and I beat them at their own game. That was the power they never thought I had, because they never looked close enough to see it. They mistook silence for submission, helpfulness for helplessness. But I was never helpless. I was waiting, watching, preparing. And when the moment came, I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't need it. I put Mom's card back in the box, sealed it, and slid it under my bed. Not to hide it, but to keep it safe. It was the only reminder I needed of who I was and who I'd always been. The calls had stopped now. The messages slowed. Amelia's tone had changed in the last voicemail she left. No more anger, just exhaustion. Claire, just call us back, please. We don't know what to do. But that was the thing. I did. For once, I knew exactly what to do. And it didn't involve saving anyone but myself. That was enough. Finally, it was enough. 3 weeks after the closing, my apartment no longer felt new. It felt like mine. The dishes in the cabinet were ones I had chosen. The framed prints on the wall were from my own designs, simple, clean, calming. The light that poured through the windows every morning didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. Work had started to pick up again. A new client found me through a referral, and within days, I was leading a redesign for a wellness startup run by a female founder in Oregon. She called me efficient, direct, and wildly intuitive, 3 words no one in my family had ever used to describe me. I smiled every time I saw her name in my inbox. I named my freelance agency Second Voice Studio. It was quiet, just me, but the name was intentional. For years, I'd been silenced by the people closest to me, edited out of family decisions, talked over, talked down to. This studio was my second voice, the one that spoke not for approval, but for purpose. Every invoice I sent was a declaration of independence. Every client project was another brick in the foundation of a life I built myself. I had coffee with Eleanor one afternoon to sign some final follow-up paperwork. You know, she said, I've seen people in your position cave 100 times. Let guilt pull them back in. Let the fear of being too harsh keep them stuck. You didn't. I nodded, stirring my drink. I almost did. I almost thought about calling them. Almost felt sorry. Then I remembered what they were willing to do to me without blinking. And what you did in response, she said, raising her cup wasn't cruel. It was necessary. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's. It wasn't long, just a page written in short sentences, the way he always wrote when he didn't know how to start. Claire, I don't know what to say. I didn't expect this. I didn't think you had it in you. But that's the problem. I never bothered to see what you really were capable of. I saw what I wanted to see. And I'm sorry. We're staying in a rental now. Amelia's furious but quiet. I think maybe she's realizing what I've started to, that we pushed you too far, that maybe we lost something we didn't deserve to keep. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know. I see you now. Dad. I folded the letter slowly and placed it in the drawer with Mom's card. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I didn't write back. Because closure doesn't always need conversation. Sometimes it just needs acknowledgement. And this was enough. I stood by my window that evening, watching the sunset wash the buildings in gold. Somewhere out there, they were learning to live without the home they thought was theirs by default. They were learning what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. And I was learning finally what it felt like to live without shame, without performance, without fear. I hadn't just sold a house. I'd reclaimed myself. Every room they used to walk through now belonged to strangers. Every memory they had, assigned only to themselves, now lived in storage, neatly boxed, labeled, and out of my life. I had no plans to reach out. Not now, not for a long time, maybe not ever. Not until I was sure that if they ever spoke to me again, they wouldn't be speaking to the version of me they invented. They'd have to speak to the woman who rewrote her story with steady hands and a sharp pen, the one they never saw coming, the one who didn't just survive, she left, on her terms, and never looked back. Family teaches us how to love, but sometimes it also teaches us who not to become. We grow up believing that loyalty means silence, the sacrifice means invisibility, that being good means being small. But the truth is, kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. And love without respect is just control wearing a mask. I spent years trying to be enough for people who never intended to see me. I bent until I almost disappeared. And when I stopped bending, they called me selfish, dramatic, embarrassing. But sometimes what looks like rebellion is just someone finally choosing to live. The hardest lesson I learned is that you don't owe anyone your obedience just because they share your blood. You don't owe them your silence, your house, your peace, especially when they've made it clear they never valued those things to begin with. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a closing signature, a locked storage unit, a phone left unanswered. I didn't seek revenge. I claimed independence, and when they called me embarrassing, they gave me the final word. They thought I was staying behind, but I was already gone. This wasn't my escape, it was my arrival, and it was right on time.